This particular video is inspired by a book which is now out of print, but the good news is that it is available online and you can download it for free, and I'll give you the link to enable you to do that. Circumstantial evidence, that means things which are not essential to the narrative, is one way that we can distinguish truth from a lie, or an invented story or fiction. Those who create or invent only include the necessary information, otherwise it is very difficult to remember all of it and to be consistent. Those who tell the truth will include irrelevant simple facts simply because it's true. And Blunt's book contains over 100 examples of this type to help us realise that the Bible is a true account of true events. And I'm just going to pick one of those today. In the Gospel of Matthew, and at chapter 8 and verse 14, we read about some of the miracles of Jesus. Jesus went to Peter's home, and there he saw Peter's mother-in-law sick in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. Later, also in the New Testament, in the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, and at chapter 9 and verse 5, so a completely different author with a completely different message, who is discussing what the rights of an apostle are, he writes at chapter 9 and at verse 3, "When people criticise me, this is how I defend myself. Haven't I the right to be given food and drink for my work? Haven't I the right to follow the example of the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Peter by taking a Christian wife with me on my travel? Or are Barnabas and I the only ones who have to work for our living?" You may have missed the point. It's difficult to see. In verse 14 of Matthew, we realise that Peter was a married man. It was his mother-in-law who was sick in bed with a fever. When Paul is talking about his rights as an apostle, he talks about the right to travel with a wife and cites Peter as someone who is doing that. Unrelated events, unrelated writers, both talking about one person, both talking about Peter and mentioning the fact that he was married. It is undesigned coincidences like these which allow us to conclude that the Bible is indeed a true record of real people and real events.